Through his singular role in developing a human rights culture in South African law, Christopher John Robert Dugard contributed significantly to the overcoming of apartheid. He's an internationally recognized scholar, an international civil servant, and a judge in the field of international law, especially regarding international human rights and humanitarian law. Dugard also played a significant role in the constitutional negotiations for a democratic South Africa. Dames en heren, Professor Dugard, wat BA en LLB aan Stellenbosch behaal het en 'n doktersgraad aan Cambridge, was decaan by die Witwatersrandse Universiteit, direkteur van 'n sentrum vir internasionale reg by Cambridge en professor by die Universiteit van Leiden. Hy is nou 'n professor by die Universiteit van Pretoria, was 'n besoekende professor by 4 prominente Amerikaanse universiteite, asook 1 in Australië, en dien in die redaksionele rade van 'n verskeidenheid Suid-Afrikaanse en internasionale akademiese regstydskrifte. The National Research Foundation awarded him an A rating. He holds honorary doctorates from 5 South African universities and has received a number of prestigious awards for his contribution to the causes of human rights, international law, and the development of South African law. Through his scholarship, including his seminal work, Human Rights and the South African Legal Order, Dugard introduced human rights law as a powerful counterweight to the positivist legal culture which characterized and underpinned the apartheid legal order. His work inspired a generation of progressive lawyers and academics to become involved in public interest law in South Africa. Dugard enjoys the highest stature as a renowned scholar and practitioner of international law, on which his book, International Law, A South African Perspective, is a standard treatise. He served as judge ad hoc of the International Court of Justice, has assumed a pivotal role in the organs of the United Nations relating to international human rights law, and was the first South African to be elected to the International Law Commission. He is a consultant to the government of Cyprus on the Turkish occupation and has done extremely influential work chairing the Human Rights Inquiry Commission to investigate violations of human rights and humanitarian law in the occupied Palestinian territories. The United Nations and the international law scholarly community regard Dugard as an expert of the highest stature. His monumental contribution to the promotion of human rights and international law in a real sense established the framework for ongoing research and postgraduate training in the Faculty of Law's project on transformative constitutionalism and socio-economic rights. Mr. Chancellor, please confer on Christopher John Robert Dugard the degree Doctor of Laws, honoris causa, for this and for his singular contribution as an internationally esteemed jurist and legal practitioner to the development of human rights in South African law.
I hereby confer on you, Christopher John Robert Dugard, the degree Doctor of Laws, honoris causa.
Chancellor, distinguished guests, it is an honour for me today to propose a toast to John Dugard. His achievements rest on 3 major pillars. Firstly, through his scholarship and particularly his groundbreaking work during the apartheid era, he introduced human rights law to South Africa at a time when it really wasn't a sexy, trendy thing to be a young human rights lawyer. In fact, one was distinctly unpopular if you were doing human rights law in that era. And John persisted with great courage, moral acuity, as a proverbial lone voice in the wilderness, to promote the cause of human rights, to say that the legitimacy of the apartheid legal order had to rest on certain fundamental moral principles and laws recognized by the international community. And I think it is no exaggeration to say that the fact that today we have a constitutional democracy with a Bill of Rights, that John contributed in a major way to that legacy that we were able to inherit. However, that was not all, because his contribution was not restricted to the classroom or academic discourse. In fact, he disproved the old adage that actions speak louder than words, but far more seldom, because John participated in a very active way in founding an institute, the Center for Applied Legal Studies at Wits University, and in that capacity he was involved in arguing before the courts and providing legal advice in a number of seminal anti-apartheid cases. So, for example, he was involved in challenges against the Group Areas Act. He was involved in the cases challenging the Bantustan policies, the unlawful revocation of Archbishop Tutu's passport, and also laying the legal foundation for the argument that captured members of the Southern African liberation movements should be regarded as prisoners of war and not as common criminals. His example thus inspired a generation of progressive lawyers and academics to become involved in public interest law in South Africa, and I count myself as one of those. It must also be very gratifying for Professor Dugard to see his daughter Jackie, who is with us today, found and become the executive director of one of the most exciting new human rights institutes in South Africa, the Socio-Economic Rights Institute of South Africa. The second pillar on which Dr. Dugard's success rests is his contribution to the drafting of the 1996 Constitution and Bill of Rights. In that regard, I was very privileged to serve with Dr. Dugard as a member of the technical committee drafting the Bill of Rights. And I think the contribution that John Dugard made in that regard has perhaps received far less recognition than it should have. But it was also here that I discovered John Dugard's wicked sense of humor and sense of fun, and I bear very fond memories of that period, John. The Constitutional Court has in fact recognized John's contribution in the groundbreaking death penalty case State versus Makwanyana, where the court expressly endorsed John Dugard's views on the role of international human rights law in the interpretation of the Bill of Rights. His groundbreaking work Human Rights in the International Law, a South African Perspective, which I'm very pleased to announce the 4th edition was published this week, has had an unparalleled influence in establishing international law as a legal discipline in our law faculties. Finally, we celebrate today John Dugard's distinguished contribution to the development of international law beyond our borders. It is not only in South Africa where he is a giant in international law, but within the international community. He served as ad hoc judge, as the rector mentioned, in the International Court of Justice. He was the first South African to be elected to the International Law Commission, and he served in various capacities as special rapporteur to various UN bodies. So he has also, in the international arena, played a leadership role in the development of international law. Professor Dugard is without doubt amongst the most distinguished and illustrious alumni of the Stellenbosch Law Faculty. He worked persistently and with great courage and integrity to dismantle the apartheid legal order through scholarly research, public education, and public interest litigation. He is regarded today as an expert of the highest stature by the United Nations and in the international law scholarly community. I cannot think of a better role model for our law students today. The celebration and recognition of John Dugard's contribution to human rights is long overdue, but at least timely by this university. So it is with pride that I therefore ask you to join me in raising your glasses to toast Professor John Dugard. To Professor Dugard. Thank you.
Sandy, thank you very much for those kind words. I barely recognize myself. You're all too modest. Sandy was chairperson of the technical committee that was responsible for drafting the Bill of Rights. I was merely an ordinary member. We did have a lot of fun, and we achieved some wonderful things in wonderful surroundings. I remember that we spent one weekend working on the Bill of Rights in Franschhoek, and we decided we have to include a clause dealing with the right to a good environment in the Bill of Rights. I'm very pleased to be here today with you all, and I'm particularly pleased to be here with the Chancellor. In 1958, when I graduated, I had a close friend at Wilgenhof. I'm an oud Wilgenhofer. And his name was... his name was Sweepie Leroux. Now, Sweepie was not a little whip, or he was a little whip, but his father was a big whip. His father was Pierre Leroux, who was chief whip of the National Party. And after our graduation, Sweepie invited me to lunch at the Hotel Kutzenberg with his father and Dr. Anton Rupert. And so for me, this is a type of continuation. On that occasion, I remember feeling that I was really at the center of power in South Africa. And I don't think I've ever come as close to that as I did on that occasion. So I'm very delighted to be once more amongst the Ruperts. I started as a student at Stellenbosch in 1954. My father sent me to Stellenbosch to learn Afrikaans for 1 year, and he said after that you could go to UCT and enjoy yourself. But I stayed at Stellenbosch for 5 years, and I stayed because I really loved the place. And for me, those were really formative years. I learned something about the law, but I think that what I learned most was that the law had something to do with political change, and that although law in itself could not bring about political change, it could at least provide a framework for a decent society. And I think that is the message that I received at Stellenbosch. These were hard times at Stellenbosch when it was really the middle of the apartheid era. But there was a lot of debate and discourse at Stellenbosch, and certainly I learned my early law at Stellenbosch, and I think I developed my set of values when I was at Stellenbosch, and these have guided me throughout my career. So I'm very grateful to the University of Stellenbosch for this experience and this education, and for me it's a very special privilege and honor to have received an honorary degree this morning. So thank you very, very much. But before I sit down, I just wanted to welcome my guests, Rudy, Jaap, David, and Mike. And I would also like to say how pleased I am that I have my daughter, Jackie. Sandy has already referred to her. She is involved in the struggle again in the field of social and economic rights, and I'm very pleased that her partner Tumi is with her. Tumi, I'm so pleased you're part of the family. And then finally, just let me say that I'm very pleased to have my wife Itche with me. My wife Itche is a real chameleon. I never quite know whether she's Dutch or English or Portuguese or French, because she has grown up in all these parts of the world. But she has taken to South Africa like a fish to water, and it's really wonderful to be able to share South Africa and to share Stellenbosch with her. Thank you, Itje, for all the love and support you have given me over the time that we have had together. And again, thank you very, very much for bestowing this wonderful honor on me this morning. I really do appreciate it. Thank you.